Every life has a story, and every story is worth sharing. Your story, my story, and our story speak of victory and defeat, joy and sorrow, resilience and vulnerability. They are not just our story, they are Christ's story in us. They are Kingdom Stories from Down Under.
Welcome to Kingdom Stories. This is Natanael, Costea, and tonight I'm privileged to have Nico Oberholzer with us. Nico comes from South Africa. He moved to Australia in 2007. I've met Nico at a men's prayer at our church, and I've also journeyed with him in various circles and networks here in Perth. His story is amazing. He's gone through open cut surgery just recently, and he made it through. And there's many, many beautiful aspects of his life that we just can't wait to hear. So, Nico, welcome to Kingdom Stories from Down Under. Now you're in Australia. It's very interesting because South Africa is down under as well, and so is Australia. But I don't think they call Australia down under, do they? The South Africa. They don't call South Africa down under. What do they call South Africa?
Just plain South Africa.
So, in Africa, what would they call South Africa?
Again, just plain South Africa because it's the southern tip of Africa.
Okay.
And that's why it's...
So Australia's down under. So this Kingdom Story from Down Under is also from South Africa. Were you born in South Africa?
Yeah, born and raised. My folk go back many years in the South Africa and the history there.
Germans or Dutch?
Swiss German, from what I understand.
Both mum and dad?
I don't actually know, but the original surname is Swiss German. It actually comes from either German or Swiss, or a combination of both.
But they've been 3-4 generations in South Africa.
Yes, yeah, okay. Yeah, many times.
So why did people migrate to South Africa from Europe? Why did so many Germans and Dutch migrate?
A lot of people, and because it's German, Dutch, French, many others, basically because of religious freedom. That a lot of them in Europe, there was suppression of religious freedom, and a lot of them, like for instance the French Huguenots, moved because of that. Wanted to find a place where they can express themselves and live free in their religion. So.
Okay, so what do you remember of your childhood years?
I grew up as a farm boy. Grew up in a rural sort of environment.
What were you cropping?
My dad used to do lots of things like wheat, peanuts, so it's a multicultural sort of environment that we grew up in. So nothing specific.
So you grew up on a farm?
Grew up on a farm.
Early mornings, late evenings, hard work, machinery?
That sort of thing, yes. Yeah. I've got fond memories of my time spent on a tractor because it gives you lots of time to reflect and think about the things of life. So, yeah.
So it was a big farm?
No, not a massive, because it's an irrigation scheme that we grew up on.
Okay.
And all the little areas of plots were quite small, 24 hectares or something like that.
Oh, still big enough.
Yeah.
And you work with mum and dad on the farm?
Yes.
And then school, local community, or you went to boarding school?
No, local community school. My mum is also a teacher. So
nice.
I had the privilege in, year 3, to actually be taught by her.
And you were learning Afrikaans there? Was it an Afrikaans area or English?
Yes, yeah. No, the area that I grew up in is an Afrikaans-speaking community.
Okay.
English was more sort of restricted to places like Joburg or Johannesburg, and then especially Natal, because that's the sort of British outpost in South Africa.
All right. Okay, so what do you remember of the childhood years in the sense of, were your parents believers? Were they Christians?
Yes, like most South Africans, you sort of grew up in a church environment.
Okay.
So you go... My sort of furthermost memories was of going to church. So you sort of grew up in the church already.
Okay.
So,
what church? Is it Lutheran church or evangelical?
No, it was Dutch Reform. It's more a conservative type church. Yeah.
Okay.
At that particular point in time, it's one of the big churches in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
subsequently there was more evangelical churches that came into being.
And this was a town or a village? What was it?
A small town.
Small town.
Yeah, a small town, because the whole irrigation scheme is quite long, and you've got two major towns, Hartswater, Jan Kempdorp, and then in between them smaller sub-centres, and I actually grew up on one of them.
Okay.
Close to Hartswater, but yeah.
Okay. Brothers, sisters?
I'm the youngest of 4 sons.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So with boys around you?
Yeah.
Good.
And
what sports were you playing as a child?
most of my sports were athletics during the summer months and rugby during the winter months.
As you would have it.
Main sports, yeah.
And did the town have high schools, and you went to high school there, or you
Yes.
went to another city?
No. They had primary schools, high schools,
Okay.
so my whole school education was done from home.
Okay. And then you went to uni. What did you do in your late teens?
Like all, I think, people who finish year 12, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So I started off on a career path trying to do, computer science.
Okay. And that was at uni?
It was at uni, but it took me less than a year to figure out I wasn't a computer boffin. So eventually...
So you changed after one?
No, I actually finished the degree that I was busy with, but not my major subjects. Eventually was applied maths and physics.
Okay.
But realised pretty soon that there's not much that I can do.
So you did applied maths, physics, applied science?
Yes. Up to I finished the degree in that.
You wouldn't know this, but that was my first studies as well. I did applied science, physics and computing. Yeah. You got to be crazy to do that degree. I had 9, and you probably did the same. I had 9 mathematics units in that course.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I mean, we were doing aerodynamics and all sorts of mathematics that we never used. So at the end of it, there were 2 choices, or 3 choices. You went into teaching, you went into radiography, or you went into aerodynamics or aeronautic engineering.
Or in our case, you'd go to one of the sort of government institutions
as a scientist.
And
locked in the dungeon for a few years.
I figured out pretty quickly I wasn't brainy enough for that, but it wasn't my passion.
So you finished your studies, and then what did you do? You went and did engineering?
Yes. After I finished that initial degree, I realised that, look...
This is not for me.
It's not going to work. So I then changed over to mechanical engineering. And
did they give you some exemptions?
They did. So eventually I managed to finish my mechanical degree in another 3 years. So eventually studied 6 years in all.
Well, that's very interesting, because I went and did commerce after that, realising that I can't get a career out of applied maths and physics. So I went and did my business degree, my commerce degree. And again, I finished it in 2 years. But again, I got exemptions for almost a year because of my previous studies. Yeah. That is very interesting. Look, I never knew this about you, but we've got a lot in common, a lot more in common. Yeah. Okay, so, and where was the university?
The first university was in Bloemfontein, Orange Free State, and then the other one that I went to was Potchefstroom University.
Northwest.
Currently, the Northwest province. Did my engineering degree there.
Okay. Wow. Wonderful. And when did you meet your wife?
When I started off in the engineering field.
So after you finished?
After I finished, it's actually many years after I finished, because after I finished, I sort of took a gap year, but not a...
There was no army or anything like that?
There was still army when I started studying. Okay. There was still sort of conscription, but that pretty soon fell away. Okay. And by the time I finished study, there wasn't really any, I can say, forced or required conscription. Okay. So that was already gone then in the new South Africa.
What a relief, eh?
I don't know. There's positives and negatives to everything. Sure. It's just that wasn't my path. It just didn't cross my path. So for a lot of people, it did good. For some, not. But,
so then you got a job in engineering?
I did. I had a bursary for my engineering, but an opportunity came up to go sit as I said, my little gap year.
Yep.
Sit on a sub-Antarctic island called Marion Island for a year with 10 other guys. Because the South African government operates a base on this little sub-Antarctic island. It's about 2,000 km south of Durban.
Wow.
So that came up as an opportunity a year after I finished my studies.
Wow.
That was an experience, awesome experience as well.
So what were you doing there?
The only position that I could apply for was like a weather observer, because not like a meteorologist.
Yeah.
Literally, we just took weather readings and weather data, gathered it, and then transmitted it back to South Africa, where it was put in the bigger computers for processing and weather predictions. So,
okay.
Yeah. But it was an awesome year in terms of, I think, a founding year for me in terms of my spiritual growth as well.
There's a lot of time on your
a lot of time, and I still have very fond memories of that year that we spent on the island, because a lot of the time is your own. So I used to, and that's why I've got fond memories of it, like spend an hour and a half to 2 hours in the morning and an hour and a half to 2 hours in the evening, Bible study and reading and that sort of stuff. And
wow.
I miss the time, that that sort of era where I had
the maximum growth.
That time that I can just sit and read and ponder and pray and journey.
So it was cold? Were you indoor most of the time?
Most of the time. It's a similar sort of latitude as the south tip of the South Island of New Zealand. Okay. So it is a colder environment.
But not snow all the time, occasionally?
No, it's mostly during the winter time. Okay. And the summer now.
Any hiking on the island, or was it too small?
No, it's pretty big. The island in its circumference is about 85 kilometers.
Okay.
So it's an old volcanic island, so there's actually pretty much to see and experience in terms of wildlife, sights and scenes, old volcanoes and things like that. So
but tracks?
Lots of stories.
It would be wild.
A bit, but it's wild.
Do tourists ever go there?
No. It's basically the people that get sent there on assignment. Tourists pop up, not in our area, but some guys maybe on if it's boat cruise or something. Yeah. Although you wouldn't find many doing that far south because there's nothing else down there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you came back, obviously, to the mainland and carried on. You got a job as a
engineer again. Yeah.
Engineer.
Picked up my engineering career.
Yep.
Started off in a little town called Sasolburg. Eventually moved to Johannesburg because that's where the bigger engineering firms are, and that's where I met my wife at one of the local churches there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's good that you met at that church, eh?
Well, the place that we attended had a group for younger people.
Okay.
How can you call it? Single young folk, working individuals, and a lot of people found their soulmates in that group. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Which is good.
Yeah. How did you propose to her?
Oh, that's a story that I don't want to...
Was it that bad or was that good?
No, it was... we were actually down in Cape Town for another wedding, and I remember the one evening we were sitting and having a bit of a chat, and I was going... the way I was talking is as if we married, and she looked at me and she said, "But you haven't proposed yet." And I go, "Oh, will you marry me?" And she said, "Yes." Okay, and then I carried on again. So
you didn't have the ring, obviously.
No.
It wasn't the times with rings.
No, it was later on that we
officially
got engaged. Our sort of, when we first started going out to when we got married, it was a 9-month period. So
okay.
I believe, when God lays somebody on your heart, that's for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes time for others, but in my case, it literally took us from start to getting married 9 months.
Wow.
So,
beautiful.
Yeah.
And then you got married in Johannesburg or back in your hometown?
No, in Johannesburg. We left.
Her family was in Johannesburg?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you had children?
Yes, children. My son was born in 2002,
Okay.
and my daughter was born in 2004.
All right. So what made you come to Australia?
We basically had no. I can remember when my son was born, for some reason or another, I had no intention of going anywheres. And it's most probably because of the language thing, especially when he started speaking, and obviously Afrikaans.
But you could speak English, right?
Yeah, I can, but because
You could.
Yeah.
You'd have to for your work.
No, you do, because I mean, in work situation, everything is English.
And your degree, was it in English or in Afrikaans?
No, in Afrikaans.
Okay.
Both of them were in
Oh.
Afrikaans. But
Yeah.
when I started working,
Yeah.
everything was in English.
Okay.
It was funny in the sense is I remember my early years.
So you studied in Afrikaans and you worked in English?
Yeah, but what was funny, as I said to me, is we'd have in some instances the meetings in Afrikaans, but write the minutes in English, just for record purposes. So,
Yeah.
Anyway, but where were we?
So we were talking about moving to Australia.
Oh, and we sort of parked the idea, and I carried on with my career in project engineering and project.
What was your wife
management.
doing?
She was a teacher. She taught
Okay.
at one of the private schools in Johannesburg.
Okay.
Zulu of all things, but anyways. And when my son was born, the idea, I always, because I worked for an international company in South Africa,
Yes.
and there was always this glamorous idea of going overseas and working there, and that sort of got canned when my son was born. And then it was 2007. I remember the back end of 2006, beginning of 2007, we renovated the kitchen. So like, things are tracking along.
Yeah.
And especially Annemi also always said she's not going to go overseas because she likes having help close by, parents close by to assist with the kids. And it was early in 2007, the one day she came up to me and said, "Don't you think we should just go have a look?" And I parked the idea.
Yes.
And then subsequently in our area, which is a sort of secluded area, there was a sort of crime wave that went through, in several instances of people getting hijacked or held up overnight or things like that started happening. And I remember we sort of had a bit of a discussion, and we went one day after church on Sunday, we said to the in-laws, "Listen, we don't want you to get upset, but we're planning a trip to Australia just to sort of go have a look and see what's there. There's nothing firm in our minds." We subsequently booked a trip for October 2007.
Did they take it well or not so well?
It was a bit of a shock to them,
Yeah.
especially mother-in-law, but we sort of said, "Look, there's nothing."
Yeah.
And then eventually it was July. It was July 2007, and some of our next door neighbours got hijacked right next to our house. It's literally across the wall. It was a Sunday evening from, we were putting the kids to bed when they got hijacked, their parents. And when that happened, we sort of looked at one another and we went, we don't want to be a statistic.
No one will be next.
And I started looking at opportunities of coming across and so on. And with lots of grace from above, we literally went from July, August, making the decision, to me signing a contract at the end of September. We still came across in October.
So you came with a contract already?
Yes.
Oh,
so
wow.
It was just before the GFC hit in 2008,
Yeah.
and there was lots of demand for people.
Yeah, it was a
And,
boom,
and a company here in Perth signed up with them.
Mining.
Yeah, in the mining industry, signed up with them, and they actually moved us across.
But, fantastic.
But as I said, we literally when we made the decision to move in about July 2007, we literally, from getting the contract, coming here, having basically formalizing things, finding the school for the kids, to selling the house, and November that year the house was sold, packed up, and we flew out on 26th of December 2000.
Boxing Day.
Yeah. Flew out and arrived here on 27th.
Ready to begin your new life.
Yeah. And look, at that particular point in time, yes, we did pray about the whole decision and so on. But it's only in later reflection when you sort of look at it and you see how things progressed and walk through that you actually see God's hand in all of this, because many things subsequently happen that you sort of go, wow. The journey here, the things that's happened here, the people that you meet,
of course,
got introduced to, the places that God are using you in and so on, and you go, it's
now I understand, now I see.
Yeah. Back then it was more
some of your highlights, spiritual highlights as you on your spiritual journey, some milestones along the path when you really had some awakening moments.
For me, Natanael, is growing up, and a lot of South Africans can identify with this, is when you sort of grow up in a Christian environment.
Sure.
And so that's what you are. And I call it, for the most part, cultural Christianity.
Okay.
It's the culture that you grow up in. And while I knew that God was part of my life and, went to church and at university, I was leaders in youth camps and all of that sort of stuff. It's only, especially that year that I spent on Marion, it was a sort of watershed moment for me.
Yep.
The absolute time that you had of just spending time with God. That followed by a long period of still in the church, active in the church, doing things in the church. And I'd sort of fast forward to 4 or 5 years ago, October 2016, when Peter Pollock spoke at our church at WBC. I was the church that I attended back then. I was the men's ministry coordinator back then, and I met with Trevor early in the year. And, it was sort of awesome catch having Peter speak at our men's breakfast, not realizing that God's got more in store for me, because I can remember, and this for me is the biggest single watershed moment, is in the 2 weeks leading up to that breakfast, where I'd sit on the train, because usually with these breakfasts there's always a song that many months before I'll know exactly the song that I want to play when we open up the breakfast. And the song in this particular case was How Great Thou Art. But then for me there's always a specific rendition. And I sort of a short list of 5 that I was listening to repeatedly to sort of determine which was the one that I wanted to play. And I remember I sat in the train, as I sat and pondered this, I can only sort of say God pulled up next to me and started reorientating me, because as a project manager and so like a handyman, I like working with my hands. You're always busy with practical stuff and doing things. And in that period, that 2 weeks leading up, I'd sit on the train listening to these songs, and the tears will just start running down my face, and I go, what's happening here? It's the foreign thing for me. And I remember I spoke to Trevor in the sort of lead up. They were in Adelaide, and I said to Trevor, I don't know what's happening here. Something funny is happening here, but I'm acting all emotional and sometimes emotional irrational, and as I said, for me it was a process where God started reorientating me, and the breakfast that we had, and Peter subsequently spoke on the Sunday service as well, where it just ministered to me that was said, but also just God journeying with me. And from that, there's a couple of key things that came out of that. And I remember a friend asked me to give my testimony at Perth prayer, and I sort of go, well, I don't really have a testimony, because normally the people that give their testimony at Perth prayer have got a massive story of whatever, I don't have that story.
You have an ongoing story. You are the story.
I'm just a farm boy from South Africa. But the one thing that God made sure I understand is that the story of salvation, whether it's big, small, or whatever, is your story and it's worth sharing.
Absolutely.
But when I was pondering on as part of that and the points that I wanted to share, and God highlighted a couple of things to me, and that's forever sort of etched in my mind. And the first thing that was very clear is I can stop doing now, because forever, I was busy with church stuff.
Performance.
Yeah, when there was this function or that function, or when anybody asked me for something, I'll do something. I'll be busy. Up to the point where my wife Annemi would say to me but I'm getting to the point of, to put it bluntly, resenting the church, because the church is actually taking you away from me.
Yeah.
In the sense of doing things. And as I said, that's one of the points that God really spoke to me and said this, you can stop doing now. And it took me a long time to realize what it means to stop doing and just being. And then the other thought, and it's in a sentence that's always also been with me ever since, is God sort of laid on my heart, and the sentence goes, God is way less concerned about my earthly comfort than I would like him to be, than what he is about my completeness in him.
Wow.
And
that's profound.
And that to me has been, the stop doing bit. And then just the completeness in him of actually, if God says you can sit at my feet for the next year, for somebody who's continually busy doing things, it was a bit of a profound thought to say, that's all what God asked me to do. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to perform so I can earn his
love or
whatever
points.
The case. And ever since that, it's been a watershed moment for me in my relationship with God. And I sometimes go, why God did it take 48 years to get to that sort of point? Couldn't we sort of do it first, a bit earlier or so on? But God's timing is perfect in it all, and
Now you carry on. Obviously, you lead the men's prayer every Friday morning, when about a dozen men come every Friday morning at 6 a.m. for an hour and a bit every Friday morning. How did that begin, and how's the Lord leading you through this?
Interestingly enough, it also started at the back end of 2016.
Okay.
And there was a couple of folk from the church that I used to go to, or attended back then, and we had some informal chats with one another. And there was a general sense of, if I want to use the word, disgruntlement with church in general, not the church that we attended specifically, but just church in general. And I remember we once agreed that we'll just get together for a coffee in West Perth, and Trevor asked if he can come along, and so we were 5, and we had a bit of a discussion. And what came out of that discussion was look, let's just get together. We don't have answers or any whatever. Let's just get together on a Friday morning. At that point in time, we were going to do it fortnightly. Get together at 6 o'clock, because it's early enough that we can do this and still go and work and so on. And we got together, it was early January 2017.
Okay,
and
so 4 years ago.
Yeah, and then started meeting, and it took us less than a month to figure out fortnightly is not going to work, and we switched to weekly.
Wow.
And for a long period, we were just the 4 or 5 of us. And then slowly along the journey, God started adding people. Some left, some came, and
at times there's even 20 guys.
And that
plus
always,
those on Zoom as well, on various electronic. It's just wonderful. And to carry on for 4 years on. It's an amazing testimony. Well done.
Well, it's nothing that I specifically did, because
you allowed it to flow through you.
I agree, but from day one, we said to one another, there is no program here.
Yeah.
All we want to do is sit and reflect on the word that God ministered to us.
Yes.
And that's been the cause. I remember there was, at one point, one of the gentlemen wanted to, he's also a doer type person. He sort of goes, so when are we going to do stuff?
Yeah.
No,
we are doing it.
Yeah, but
this is it.
But it's not our mandate to go and do stuff. We're not going to organize a whatever thing. We are sitting and listening and fellowshipping with one another and with God. And for me, it's the most amazing thing that every Friday morning we get together.
Yeah.
And yes, there's a word from whoever. Sometimes we've got a bit of a speaker or not. But I almost want to say God turns up.
Hallelujah.
He's there, and it's you've participated in some of those meetings, and it's just such an awesome, glorious thing when the living God is there amongst you, and you tangibly almost can feel that.
Yeah, it is beautiful, and also the breakfast that you guys put up, and obviously the government prayer breakfast that you play a massive role in. Kingsway Christian College as well. You're on the board of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think your reach in the community is very important, especially in the Christian circles, which is just wonderful to see. I want to talk about your surgery. Not so long ago, you've had open heart surgery.
Yes.
Did it shock you when you first found out what was going on?
I'm still trying to think whether it actually shocked me, but it came out of the blue. It's not like I had.
How did they pick it up? Did you feel something? Or
No, there were no symptoms, no nothing.
Just a routine health check?
What happened was my wife, some of her tennis friends, their husbands went for similar sort of checks. Okay. And they found issues with him. The one guy had a single bypass and the other guy had a stent, and Annemi said to me, no, it's been a while with all this COVID stuff. You haven't done a medical checkup for a while. You go see the GP, and as part of that, I want you to do this calcium scoring thing that the other guys did. Okay. So I did that. And, I remember I went the Friday morning, Joondalup, one of the local clinics here.
Yes.
And they did their thing, and I went home because I took the day off.
Yes.
Just because I can. And I was sitting at home just relaxing, and the next thing my phone rang, and I saw it's the GP's, the practice, and I go, interesting that they should phone me. Anyway, the long and the short is they found that there was severe blockages in 3 places in the arteries around my heart.
How did they pick that up from a blood test?
No, they actually did what they do is a CAT scan.
Okay. Of
the heart vessels.
You've asked for that.
Yeah, that was they call it a calcium scoring, but they literally inject iodine.
Yes.
So that they can see the contrast when they do a CAT scan.
Yes. Okay.
So
you actually had a heart check in a sense, a proper heart check.
Yes.
But just a routine heart check.
Yes.
Okay.
You can do it with blood tests, but this one is. The doctor suggested, look, just do this because it's a lot more clearer with what they can see. So the long and the short of it is he immediately referred me to a cardiologist, and I was booked into Joondalup Hospital that Friday evening to have a formal angiogram the next morning.
Yeah.
So the angiogram just confirmed that yes, there were blockages, and no, they can't stent them because some of them sit in awkward places that you can't stent. And the end result was that they recommended I have a triple bypass in order to fix this, because otherwise, according to them, I could have a heart attack anytime. Some of the
so that was just fast, and within weeks you were on. Yeah, the surgery, didn't you?
Yeah, so from there I was referred to a specialist.
Yes.
I went to see him, and we had a discussion. We looked at the options and said there's no real option. You have to have the surgery. And it was 2 weeks later, that he had an availability on the Monday morning, 12th of October.
Yeah.
Booked that, and off we went. So
What was going through your mind?
And again, I think it's lots of grace from above. I never question, even to this day, why me. It was the thing that immediately came to mind was a passage from Isaiah 43, where God spoke to Israel, and He said to them, "You are my chosen people."
Yeah.
And then he goes on and he says to them, "But when you go through the fire, I will be with you. When you go through the storms, I will be with you. And I will take care of you." And that's one of many passages in the Bible where God says, "Look, in this life we will have troubled times, but He will see us through." So I immediately, that came up to me, and that was my rock, my anchor of saying but God said we're going to have troubles in our lives in various forms and shapes.
Yeah.
But He will He will guide and protect us through all of that.
I mean, the risk is quite high, isn't it? There's so many things that can... I mean, they stop the heart, don't they? Physically, they stop the heart.
Yeah, look, if you go ask the heart specialist, then they say the risk of something fatally happen is quite small because it's a routine operation, but it's still a big operation.
Yeah.
Because they do stop your heart, they collapse your lungs, they put you on
life support.
Life support and everything. So
then they cut you open and then they take a vein from your legs. And
and sew it in to bypass these...
Three times?
Yeah.
Three arteries?
Yeah.
How did your wife and your children take it though?
Again, my wife had a stint 5 years ago where she was diagnosed with bowel cancer. It was a polyp that they removed that was cancerous, and when they did further test work, they eventually removed about 50% of her colon.
Okay.
So she had another instance of going through major surgery, and also part of her testimony, I remember on the day of the surgery, she said she can quite clearly, and it's most probably in a dream, where she saw an angel standing at the top of the bed, the theatre bed, and since then she just had this amazing peace. And because of that experience, and coupled with my peace about the whole thing, there was never any upsets or anything at home, or none of us were anxious. And
the children?
No. And again, I say is if we as the parents aren't anxious, they take their cue from us.
Okay.
And if we trust the God... And
how many children do you have?
2.
Boys? Boy and a girl?
Boy and a girl, yeah.
Ages?
18 and going 17 for my girl.
Okay.
My son finished year 12 last year.
Walking with the Lord, both of them?
Yes, but there can be...
challenges?
There can be, I can say, is a improvement in all of that. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Coming out of that, and is there a major shift that has occurred in you spiritually, or an outlook on life after surgery?
The thing for me is Natanael. Is just when that happened, and when that Isaiah 43 is the other thing as well was that I just felt inside of me is that I wanted to walk this journey to the glory of God, whatever I do in it. And as this sort of journey progressed, and I remember prior to me going to surgery, if I just look at the number of folk at work and where they had questions, they were more anxious than me.
Of course.
And then you can just testify, but why do you have peace? It's because God's there. And since then and after that, and just through the whole journey of the operation and how well it went and the recovery and so on, it's just a testimony to God.
Yeah.
He's in control. And
well, it is amazing. I mean, we're talking 4 months on now, and you're just as healthy as anything, basically. It's just amazing. Nico, what legacy would you like to leave and pass on? What do you want people to remember you by?
It's a strange thing when you say is one legacy I want to leave.
Not leave, pass on maybe.
Yeah, I don't particularly want to leave anything.
Yeah.
And the reason when I say that is it's not about me, it's about God.
Yeah.
And if you want to call it a legacy, is just pointing to Him the whole time.
Yeah.
If people want to know at work, wherever, as just pointing to Him as the living God. In myself, as the Bible sort of says, is all we accomplish, we think we're accomplishing things, but we're just the instrument in His hand, and He's accomplishing through us.
That's right.
So it's not our legacy, it's His legacy.
Yeah.
It's Him working through us. So from my perspective, I'm not interested in leaving anything behind.
Yeah.
As long as people point it in the right direction.
So you just got to point them towards Christ. It's a beautiful testimony. Well, Nico, we'll wrap things up. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. I mean, this is quite an undertaking in the sense, you being vulnerable and just opening up and telling us the victories and also the difficulties of a life well lived. Well, there's a lot to go. We're young. I think we're going to live till 100 or a bit more. I think we need to live till about 120 post the flood. I think that's where it should be, not 80 or 70. I know the psalmist did say 80, but I believe before that it was 120. So let's aim for that, shall we? You've got a good heart now. You've got 3 bypasses. Plenty of years ahead.
Yes,
Praise God.
I'm looking forward to every year that God spares me working for Him.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, it was such an honor to have Nico with us today and to hear his beautiful story. Obviously, we got to stop doing, as Nico said. God has made it very clear to him to stop doing and just being and allowing and just working with the Lord, what the Lord is doing, and we just be part of it and do our part in this side of eternity. Join us more for more stories, kingdom stories from down under. Please subscribe to the channel that you're watching this through or you're listening through, podcast, iTunes, Google, through wherever you're enjoying this content. Rate us and share, distribute to others as well. Make sure you tune back here for more kingdom stories from Australia. My name is Natanael Costea, and I bless you from down under.
Thank you for joining us on Kingdom Stories from Down Under. We'd love it if you would subscribe, rate, and share these stories with your wider community. And remember, every story is worth sharing, including yours.